And then the other thing is that I put a link to a BSF site about who we are and the sort of connections we have with academia. So I put that, so that'd be useful for you later, maybe. We do have a whole bunch of different places around the world, and in the US we have two. We have what's called CARA, which is in California, and the other one, Northeast Research Alliance. And they all have their different focuses, and we have experts in all those areas that do reach out. And if I thought about it better, I'd actually had one of them come here. But anyway, so the answer to the question, I think, is one of the things you need to know is to listen to what the job is we're trying to do. And it's one of the things that I think a couple of companies I've worked for, and I said in the beginning, I've worked for, I've been through various mergers and acquisitions of big companies. And one of the things is question is what is the job that's trying to be done? What is the problem that's trying to be solved? Because if you go to a company with something that's not in their ballpark, so you come with me for something about catalysts, I'll just pass it off to the catalyst guys. I won't be interested. But if it's biotech, I'm all over it. So it's the question is finding the right person to talk to, and then listening. And one of the ways you can listen is going to meetings, etc., or just looking online at something like LinkedIn and see what's being studied, or being aware of what's out there. I mean, my job entails being aware of what's out there. That's what I do, and I'm a sort of, I have all this stuff that comes in, and then I pass it out to people. So I just want to break the ice. That's maybe that germinates something in your mind. And again, I'm biotech, but the focus is, that's just my focus. The principles of getting attention of industry are probably the same with anything.
Ray, thank you. I appreciate that. Your comments remind me how, and I wonder if you would just react to this. Your comments make me think, oh, there's probably a certain need for faculty members to also be prepared to do some of that connecting as they're listening and learning about the problem that you're trying to solve. For example, about an hour ago, I just received an email from a colleague in engineering who is teaching a graduate seminar, and the students asked for additional help with facilitation. In other words, they feel like they need some communication assistance. And I thought to myself, as I read the request, oh, sure, I could do this, but I have a colleague who's previously worked on collaborative research projects with engineers in terms of the context of trying to figure out client needs and working with engineers specifically in facilitating conversations about design problems. Long story short, I'm going to route this person to my colleague who has some more expertise in working with engineers. Would it be fair to say that from a faculty perspective, sometimes there's real value in just saying, no, that's not my thing, but perhaps you're someone else who would be more directly useful in solving your problem?
Yeah, so if you're aware of what the rest of the faculty is doing and what's going on, then if you hear somebody with an issue, and I think about it, I went to the Cereals and Grains meeting in November in Minneapolis, which was nice. It was a real meeting. And I sat at a table with various different people at different times, people I didn't know. So when you go to meetings, don't sit with the people you know. Go sit with somebody else, because that person may be interested in what you're doing. If they're not, move on to another table. The networking at meetings is there for a reason. It's for networking, not for sitting with your friends. And and that sounds a little strange, but I go to Toastmasters meetings in North Carolina, and if you understand what Toastmasters is, and what I do is I go and sit with people I completely don't know, because that's the most value I can get from these networking meetings. So I don't know if that's helpful, but and then if you do hear of something, maybe you know somebody within your faculty that might be able to help with that.
No, great, great sound advice. Participants, what works for you in listening to and learning from potential industry partners, or what hasn't worked for you, or what help do you need in doing this discerning as you listen to industry partners. Please go ahead.
Yep, just jump in.
Yep, jump in. And if you don't mind starting with just a brief who you are and what is your area of study, please.
Yep, so let me, someone, okay. Yeah, I'm Ethan, associate professor in the Department of Green Science and Industry. My area is about the biofuel and the bio-based material. So we are doing, trying to convert the lignocyanuric biomass and organic waste into fuels, chemicals, and material. Oh, excuse me. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So so I don't have much experience, frankly, with the industry. So my research is more fundamental than applied. But I do have some collaboration with the industry partner. So but even though not much, but to me, so I think collaboration with the industry partner is great. So we can know what's the real world problem that we can really help with. And that can also help us to spark some idea. So what kind of new things and what kind of real problem we can do to help. So instead of just stay, and really help without solving real problems. So because even though we are doing fundamental research, but eventually we're going to solve some problem in the real world. So that's why I think sometimes we need to really listen to the industry partner and see what kind of help and what the problem so they account. And we probably can support some, for example, from my angle, we could support kind of fundamental support or theoretical guideline, and we can meet together. So, we can do the kind of research to provide the fundamental guideline, and then industry partner can bring in real problem. So we go from a different way, but we're going to meet somewhere. So eventually, the theoretical things will be applied to solve the real world problem.
So I have a question for you. So how, or if have you, or how would you, and that goes for everybody, establish what industry is doing in your field that might be of interest? Because as you say, you don't have much contact. So is that because you aren't in contact with those people, or you're not sure who's doing it, or and I would ask this to other people as well. What are you doing as part of your?
So that's a good question. Yeah. So
looking out there and listening to say, well,
yeah.
Because if I think about, you say you're doing research, you're doing fundamental research. In the 1980s, I was doing fundamental research, which now is on 300 million acres.
Yeah. So and sometimes when I reach out to industry partner, and I told them my research is that sounds like far away from what I'm doing right now.
So that's the difference. You need to. That was one of the take homes is to and this is maybe listening. Maybe this is part of communicating, but listening about asking them what their key issues are.
Yes.
Because that way you can understand where because you know your research, right? Each of you knows very well what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you ask what the issues are in the industry, and then you see whether it's within your doing may fit that, maybe that key that fits into that lock that they don't know about.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to come and look at everything you do.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to listen to them, you're going to say, well, what are the key issues in my industry, related industry, that might be useful? Has anybody else got a comment on that? How they do that?
Yeah, I think your point is really good. So that is what we can do to kind of listen to. That is how we listen to the industry. Yeah, and learn from them. Yeah. So.
Young Cheng, your microphone's on. Is that you're going to respond?
I think I turn on now. So I'll make a few comments. So I'm Yong Cheng Shi from Green Science too. I'm a professor in the department. Before I became a faculty, I worked in the industry. Worked for National Starch in New Jersey before I came back as a faculty. I actually visited BASF in Germany and Copenhagen. So interesting, but not actually on their encapsulation emotion part, doing the encapsulation of vitamins and the carotenoids, big business there. I'm really impressed the facility there, BASF in Germany, a very huge facility there. But for me, I think two probably ways is one, because I worked in the industry, so I had some contacts with industry companies already. The other is Ray mentioned is probably at the conferences, and there are opportunities to interact with people from industrial companies, and then I try to understand what their needs are and how we may be able to provide, and maybe something they are interested in, but they may not have time to do it, or maybe it's too fundamental and they may not have the capability of doing that, or they have other priorities, but they're not able to do the work they may be interested in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to room 2. It's good to see you. If I learned anything from the first room, it's that we need to get started right away because our time will go very, very quickly. And that's a good thing. That means people have lots of things to say. Hello, I am Colene Lind. I'm an associate professor in the A.Q. Miller School of Media and Communication. I'll be helping facilitate today. I'm going to do a screen share with the prompt that will focus our discussion for the next few minutes. If you'll allow me just a second. You should now be able to see a slide which asks you to ponder, how do you listen to and learn from potential industry partners about their needs? I'll give you just a moment to think about that. How do you listen to and learn from potential industry partners about their needs? One of the nice things about the way that this workshop is arranged is we're not going to listen to lectures to try and learn how to do these things. We're going to listen to each other. So I hope that you will all reflect and share about some of your personal experiences, maybe some successes, maybe some failures that you've had toward this end. And if you'd like to do a screenshot or use your phone to take a picture of this slide or just to jot down the question, to help encourage some conversation and to allow us to see each other, I'm going to pull this slide down in about 10 or 15 seconds. Okay, very good. So to get started and to help move things along, rather than doing a round robin introduction, when you first respond, would you just please tell us who you are and what your area of study is? And if anyone has an initial thought or reflection or something they want to share about how do you listen to and learn from potential industry partners about their needs, wonderful, please unmute yourself. And if we don't, I might lean on our industry representative, Arnand, to maybe share his thoughts about how we as faculty ought to be listening to and learning from potential industry partners. Arnand, do you mind?
I can try. I can try because I was reading the question and I said, I am the industry partner. So so I can try to tell you do we learn from university what they are doing, and it's not a big secret. Is there are two things. First of all, reading and keeping pace with what's happening in the reviews and journals and whatever. But maybe not the best one. I think the best, and we have been really in bad shape for 2 or 3 years, is really going to conferences, meet the people, go on the site, because there is what we are told during the conferences, and there is everything we are just exchanging between the conferences. And from my experience, where I have been learning and finding more partnerships and potential, it was sometime by looking at the conference and say, oh, that's, I think, a good example. One of the latest device we have been creating was the SRC. So it was not done with university, but it was someone doing a presentation, and I found the system, the principle interesting. And then we just had a discussion about how they were doing, and we found out that there should have been ways of doing a little bit better, and that's where we start with an idea. On the other side, I have been contacted many times by university people who come to our booth and say, look, I invented this piece of equipment, and sometimes it works. We have been developing part or improving part of our devices with ideas coming from the industry. I would say the ratio of win-loss is maybe 10% win for 90% loss. And most of the time, it's not because the idea is bad. I just want to, it's because it's not well sold. I mean, we do not understand what can be the benefit, what can be the outcome of that, and we remain really in the technicity of it, and we are explained very deeply with a lot of detail how it works and why it's cool. But what are you going to do with that? Which kind of decision are you going to do with that? If you're a baker, if you're a miller, or someone else, it's less clear. And this is a real stop for us, because if we don't see what can be the future of the idea, we do not invest in that. Sometimes it's bad, but that's the way it is.
Thank you. That's very helpful. What I hear you say is it's not enough to keep up with the journals. You've also got to keep up with colleagues and contacts, and that means going places to meet people. And secondly, if you're pitching ideas, it's not enough to explain how it works. You also have to explain how it's going to meet one of your needs, which would behoove us all then to understand and know your needs in industry. Any thoughts or reflections, any successes that any of you have had, or challenges that you face that you'd like to get some feedback from others on how to make these connections and how to do an effective job of figuring out the needs of potential industry partners?
I'll chip in. Actually, me and Arnav were in the same room, and we both had a success story that we already shared. But I have one question here that, one of the places that, our success came because we met in the conference, and that's how it started. And our partnership is going on from last 4 years. So other than conferences, is there any other place where industry would like us to listen? Is there any way that we should communicate with them other than the conferences, or no?
That's a good question.
That's a good question, because of course I'm a little bit twisted by the fact of for me, conferences or direct personal visits on site were what I've been using now. Now we see, of course, more and more the social networks which are working, but maybe because I'm a little bit from old time. Connection is extremely important. I mean, there is a big difference by receiving an email with a nice presentation or something, and discussing 10 minutes with a coffee with someone in front of you. There you can really have the feeling. If you're that's also part of the job. We are human. So yeah, the connection and the fact that all the people are dealing with you, you can feel if you you will be able to work together, which is also a big part of a success. So it's a little bit alchemy of everything. And I don't want to take too long, but we have stories where we, Chopin, we have been declining an idea, and this idea became a new device in our concurrent, in our competitor, and vice versa. We have a device in our range, and we perfectly know that this idea was refused by the competitor. So it means it's not because someone tells no that you have to stop. I mean, you have to, if you really believe in your idea, you have to continue and continue. But yeah, I think really as much as you can, if you can make direct contact, that's always better. And for that, conferences are very, very good opportunities.
Wonderful. Thank you for that question. I appreciate that point that, just because you hear no once doesn't mean that your idea is bad. There's a fine line between being sort of like headstrong and not changing your pitch or improving your presentation and just taking no as the final answer. You can't take the no. You've just got to think about, how do I improve my presentation or my...
Yeah, I think that if you have a no, it's always interesting to say, okay, I agree, but why no? What is the reason? Because sometimes it's just the bad timing. Because at this moment, the company already has some development and they just cannot take it. It's just too much. And sometimes it's just only that. And sometimes the company would just say no, and maybe 2 years after they can say yes. So knowing why is the no, and if the no, it's because we do not understand or we do not believe, then it means you need to change the pitch.
That's right. Paul, not to put you on the spot, but I noticed that you unmuted yourself. Did you have something to add to this?
Well, I was, conferences, that's a proven, and you have a case study right here in our breakout room with that. But do you ever go looking for talent? Do you do search the publications? Do you, and once you do that, do you feel like comfortable enough to have an open conversation, or do you immediately feel you need to move to a confidentiality agreement or some sort of protection on that? I'm just, is there any proactive, for those that are shy and maybe are waiting for an opportunity? I don't, is that a doomsday approach for faculty to wait on their publication record to serve them well?
That's a question for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just would you go talent searching, or based on a publication record, or you need folks to come looking?
Yeah, we do that. That's definitely true. That when you are looking at publications, you start seeing names or places which are repeatedly speaking about topics which are in your field of interest. And that's where you say, okay, you can identify some individual and say, okay, this is a person which has a certain knowledge, and then we can approach them, definitely. Again, personally, I prefer to approach them directly, personally. If I cannot, I will send an email, but it's always more easy to not answer an email or decline kindly an email. And then when you are just discussing together, you increase your chances. So that's the reason why we are doing that. Yeah, and you were mentioning the NDAs. I think now it's something very well accepted for companies. Just right now, I have 2 NDAs running, and I do not feel comfortable if I do not have 2 or 3 NDAs at the same time, because that means we are not creating values and searching for something new. So that's something we are, that's part of the normal life now.
Thank you, Arnaud. Participants, what other questions do you have, or ideas, or ways of thinking about learning from industry partners? I am not a scientist, so this is coming from a very naive perspective, but Arnand, you might be able to correct my thinking about this. Per your comments about face-to-face and the value of the 10-minute discussion, it would seem to me that one of the most valuable things for a faculty member would be to be on site, to actually see your industry face-to-face at some location. How does that happen? Does it start with a conversation at a conference? Is that something that someone can ask? May I please see? How can someone get on location for an potential industry partner?
From my experience, yes. I mean, you can. The good thing with the conferences for us is that many times you have. Many times you have booths and you have tabletops and things like that. So we are visible, and it's also part of the game that we are here to be seen and to be approached. Of course, our bosses want us to be here for selling things, but personally, I'm not going there for that. I'm going there for searching for new opportunities and partnerships and things like that. So yes, definitely I have been approached, and myself, I have been approaching other people just by going and say, hey, I just see your talk, very nice one, and I would like, maybe we can discuss a little bit more. Or people coming to me with a copy of their poster and say, look, I've been working on that, and we just start discussing, and that's really the fun part of the job. So yeah, even in 10 minutes we can just feel a little bit if we can go further, and then after we can continue discussion.
I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the connection to an earlier point about not taking no for an answer. In the previous iteration of this group and this conversation, Ray made the point that, at a conference, 10 minutes at a table is enough. And if you haven't made a connection in about 10 minutes, it's probably time to move on to the next table. And that's just expected. You're not there to hang out and have in-depth conversations with old friends. You're there to make as many connections as possible. So these don't have to be long, in-depth, or drawn-out connections. You're moving and networking, working the group, as they say. Yeah.
On the contrary, I would say, if you have something taking your arm for 2 hours, you're feeling you're wasting your time, and you cannot make connections. So you can feel it if you're coming with an idea to an industry people, and if he is retaining you for more than 1 hour, it means he's really interested. Otherwise, just in 10 minutes, he understood, and if he's interested, you can make sure he will contact you.
Great. Participants, we have about 1 minute left. This is the last chance to ask those burning questions or to offer some insights.
We've talked about doing quad charts before. Now, do you find those helpful if somebody has a prepared quad chart, if they're kind of to help facilitate the speed dating, if you will, table to table at these conferences, if they have a well-designed spot where they've done their research, maybe in your company, some background?
It can be. I never been faced to that. But yeah, why not? Yeah, it can help, particularly with people which are not used to make these kind of things. It can be, yes, it can be helpful. Of course, yeah.
Great, thank you for that, Paul. All right, well, in the last few moments that we have left, thank you everyone for being here. It was great to spend some time with you. Arnand, especially appreciate your reflections and your sharing, and have a great afternoon, everyone. I'll see you back in the big room before this is over.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Group 2 discussion. I am Colene Lind. I'm an associate professor in the A.Q. Miller School of Media and Communication. I'm also the director of the Institute for Civic Discourse and Democracy. I'm going to screen share now the prompt for this discussion. How do you listen to and learn from potential industry partners about their needs. If you would take a moment to reflect on some successes that you have had potentially, or some challenges that you faced as you've tried to learn from industry partner what their needs are, or if you have some questions for our industry representative, if you take a moment to think about that prompt. I'd also encourage you to take a photo of it or write it down quickly or screen share, do a screen capture so that you can have that in front of you, because I will take this down in just a few moments. Anyone need more time with it? No? Okay. And in the interest of time, as I hope that you have been doing in your other rooms, if you would just please introduce yourself briefly so that I know who you are. I know some of you, and it's good to see some of you again, but tell us who you are and what your area of study is just once before you begin your comments. So, is there anyone that has a burning story to tell us of success or failure in trying to listen to and learn from potential industry partners? Or do we have any questions directly for Sean, our industry representative, while Dr. Finney is here? If you want to just go ahead and unmute yourself and jump in, there's no shame in that whatsoever. One of the things that I appreciate about the way that Maureen has structured this event is that we don't have to listen to a lecture on how to do communication. Instead, we can learn from each other and our questions and our experiences. So please fire away.
Colene, this is Jim Gillard in Department of Animal Sciences. I work in the area of beef cattle nutrition and management. And so a lot of our work has in fact been done with industry partners. One maybe good example of where we were able to bring a lot of resources to bear for the benefit of one of our industry partners is a local entity in Wamego, Kansas, that produces a direct-fed microbial product that is used throughout the beef and dairy industries in particular. And it's used as a preventative for a key metabolic disorder that afflicts lots of cattle throughout the country or throughout the world. They had an issue and that the product had a 14-day shelf life. And so you can imagine that moving that outside of the boundaries of the US was simply not feasible. And so we spent a lot of time with them trying to understand the inner workings of their business and the limitations of that. And embarked on a program to extend the shelf life of the product specifically. And so collaborating with them, bringing together outside funding sources, federal dollars, and so on, we were able to devise methodology to get that shelf life up to a couple of years, which has then allowed them now to expand throughout the US as well as internationally. And so just, having a clear understanding of the things that were major limitations for their business, that was certainly one of them. The dose size that they were using was an area that was problematic for their customers. And so that's something that we worked quickly on to try to concentrate the dose to make it more manageable for their customer base. And so I think, just being a good listener and trying to really understand and asking the right questions so that we get a clear picture of what their problems or limitations are, and then bringing the people together that can help to resolve the problem. And so, but I think it all starts with being a good listener, and sometimes they don't actually know what the problems are or what are the root causes of the problems that they have. And so asking the right questions to get at the root cause, I think, is pretty key to that process.
Thank you, Jim. I have lots of questions for you, but I should open it up to others. And Sean, I wonder if you could maybe reflect on and comment on that story and whether or not that rings true with you in your experience in working with faculty members on partnering?
Yeah, I think doing a little bit of homework really pays off. So like you can ask those right questions that Jim was referring to. So going online and being familiar with their website, even though it can be somewhat generic, but even more involved is like looking through LinkedIn at the company's posts. You can learn a lot about their needs by their posts and what they're following as well. So gathering that type of information can be really useful when you do see people like an R&D manager or whoever else at a meeting or even through an email to kind of ask the appropriate questions. So because there are things that we don't fully understand or see from an industry standpoint. I mean, we're literally on a 90-day time frame typically on kind of what's going on with our business. So it's good to have people with broader perspectives mention a few things and make connections that we're not really seeing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Jim's story and then your point about getting to know those companies in their public-facing materials reminds me that in the previous two iterations of this conversation, we spent most of our time talking about sort of the first contact. So it seems to me there are two different kinds of communication going on here. One is that first contact, where you're trying to assess whether or not there's any match at all between faculty's research product and what the industry needs. But then what Jim is really talking about is a longer term relationship. And Jim, what I'm hearing you say is that while the industry might have came to you with a problem, it was an iterative, more long-term process to really find out enough about their needs to be able to help them address that problem. Would you say that that's correct?
Yeah, I would say that's often the case where there's a lot of complexity oftentimes around the issues that they face, and it takes time for us to really understand the things that limit them in their business, and that we have to try to address to overcome. So, yeah, it rarely does it happen in one conversation.
Yeah. Great, thank you for that. I don't want to cut. If others have reflections on that point, wonderful. Please speak up. But I also sense that most of you probably wouldn't be here if you didn't want to get started in these kinds of relationships. So maybe if we would focus for a little bit on sort of that first contact. Sean, what have you found to be successful when you are either looking for industry partners, or what have you found faculty members to be, which ones, or what are the faculty members who are successful in learning what you need? What are they doing? How are they approaching you? What kinds of questions are they asking?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I was trying to buy my time to kind of get a better answer.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, I was going to mention one thing that's happened over the last maybe 10 or so years that has helped us make connections with some academic research is these formation of these centers of excellence, I guess is maybe not the right term, but in the food science area, there's two in particular that we're part of. One of them is at Ohio State University. There's a flavor research group that really focuses on this industry connection with flavor research. So, you could be a member of this group and get some access to equipment and research and so forth. And that's been a good process for us to learn both sides on flavor chemistry and so forth, as well as there's also a plant protein innovation center at the University of Minnesota that, similar format where you pay for becoming a member. They have research, access to research equipment and research projects, and like this community of like-minded people. So thinking how that can work with your own specialty might be somewhat of another avenue as well. But both of those we've also been able to have that iterative process of talking about our needs and learning what the capabilities are and kind of going from there.
Great, thank you. Questions? observations, I wonder ifs. Sean, one of the themes that we've talked about in previous groups was conferences and how to make the most of them and making industry connections. How many conferences do you go to a year? Where do you go? And how would you recommend that faculty maximize their opportunities at those conferences to learn from industry partners?
Yeah, I would say previous to COVID, I was probably going to, 4 to 6 a year. And then since COVID, probably, 2 at the most, in person, but quite a bit more virtual meetings too. So that's kind of spurred the other way. You know, I think each organization can be a little different. They each have their like structures of divisions where they get narrowed down to kind of specialty areas. So I think just trying to find the area that obviously fits within your research area, but also has a good strong industry representation, and just starting your connections there, realizing the first year or two might not pan out, but like Brian said, it's just a matter of getting that face time and really might not be applicable the very first year, but the following year you might have some insights to the to the current needs that they have.
Very good.
I also want to mention one of the difficulties that some companies have. I think Bay State Milling is a little bit more open than others, but sometimes, research and development people with companies will kind of build this firewall of, we can't talk about too much because of our competitors. So trying to press and get the right information and learning how you want to ask the right questions so you can learn, but not in a way that catches them in a very defensive way would be important as well.
Great point. I would not have thought about that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it might have been an offhand comment about, you might not be successful in the first year. Stop me if this theme has already come up in your group, but something that we've talked about in the previous circles repeatedly is not taking no as the final answer from everyone. If the first person is a no, you move on. Could you reflect maybe for a little bit, Sean, on how to react to the no's or why you might be getting a no and what you think faculty members should take away from a no?
Yeah, a lot of the no's I give are just the timing. I can't fund it this year. It's of interest, or that doesn't really quite apply to our needs right now, and I'll tell them why. I will say be careful though if you are soliciting funds, because this last year I got in an issue where another colleague of mine was like, "Hey, are you about to fund a project on X, Y, and Z? Because we're about to fund it too, and I heard your name with the same." So we actually compared proposals. They were exactly the same, and the researcher was just kind of trying to double dip, and that ended up in that researcher not getting anything at all. So, being upfront of like, it's fine to try to get as many different, but just be honest about it. So that really did not end well for the researcher, unfortunately. And it was a good project. It just, try not to double dip it.
It left a bad taste in your mouth, obviously.
Yeah.
Which goes back to the theme that we were talking about in preparing for this workshop. It all starts with relationships and making sure that you're putting your best foot forward for a strong relationship.
Yeah.
Great story.
But I mean, also being open to a critical evaluation of whether it's a proposal or an idea, I think is good. I mean, ask, what are the weaknesses with it, or why was it not, on your top of wanting to be funded, and a lot of times people will be quite honest. It could be as simple as, we had other priorities that were a little higher, but next year it could also just be higher up on their priority list.
I think that's an excellent point. And unless we ask, you're not going to learn that it may not have anything to do with the quality of the idea. It's probably more about something else, the timing.
Cool.
Yeah.
it can also be as simple as the person just didn't fully understand the science and they didn't feel comfortable pitching it to their boss. I mean, I've been in that situation where it's like, I have to do a lot of homework to understand the technology that we want to utilize, so then I could frame it in a way that my boss, who has less expertise in this field, can adequately evaluate the need to fund the project. So being able to put things in a one pager, or, you know, I hate to use the word dumb it down, but just a way of, you know, articulating what the theme or the focus is in a way that can be discussed to a bunch of people with MBAs as opposed to PhDs is important.
Along those lines, Sean, Arnand in a previous group was sharing that occasionally he has turned down, oh, we just have a minute left, so maybe you won't get to this. Occasionally he has turned down a project because he saw that it was a good idea. He just couldn't see how it was useful to his needs. Mm-hmm. How important is it that faculty members approach this not as, here's what you need to know about my project, but rather, here's what my project can do for you? I think that that's the shift that we're trying to make here, but is that, it's probably not as easy as I make it sound.
Yeah. I mean, it's also knowing the competitors as well, like, you know, being able to play it into the perspective of, you know, this will defend you with your competitors or align you more, you know, adequately with your competitors. So understanding the competitive landscape, I think, is important too. I'm not sure if that's going in the direction you wanted it, but
I don't care what direction it goes. What I'm trying to get is new insights from you, and I think that's a really important point that we haven't talked about. That this is a competitive business. These are not the only faculty members out here doing research. Yeah, no, point taken.